Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rogers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
Claudette, I think you might be the first real track athlete.
Yeah,
Ruth.
you're
Ruth.
the first that didn't really have a road history.
Right. Yeah, I don't really have a road history. I'm more 8 and 15. I love the roads though, they're fun.
Did you ever run a road mile, or were they around
Yes.
then?
I did Fifth Avenue Mile a bunch of times. And that was really fun. Yeah, I even love loved probably up to 10Ks. At one point I really did want to do a marathon, but because it's so different than the track, you'd have to train separately for it. And I love track. I really love track. So that wouldn't want to take away, but I always wanted to do like a really good 5 or 10K. And I did Carlsbad one year and I was sick. Joe thought I was gonna run like 15. I ran 16:30, thought I'd run like a minute faster or something like that. I mean, I didn't train for it, but we would, do longer stuff. So I do like the road stuff.
Well, I read, your background, you're into cross country, you're a cross country racer,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
high school and college. Did you went to the University of Oregon, I believe?
I did. Yeah.
And who were the runners on your team then?
So it was really funny. Because we had quite the team, and even just making the cross country team, my freshman class was Kathy Hayes and Rosa Gutierrez, and we had Aaron Forbes, and we were all Oregon runners. So I went to high school in North Salem, and Kathy and I duked it out at the state meet in the 1500, and then we had Aaron Forbes. And we had Lisa Martin, and then when she was inducted into the Hall of Fame at Oregon, I was up there as well. And I remember her joking, she had gotten silver medal in the 84 Olympics, but she just was worried she wouldn't be able to beat Kathy in cross country. So we had a fantastic cross country team. And I think that really helped that strength, my getting that great base for track, because we would do a lot of minute runs and Tom would have us do. And that was I think it was Aaron's high school workout that Tom took. It was a minute on and 30 seconds off. And because they're distance runners, the minute part was fine for me. But I'm had that little sprinter blood. So I want to jog the 30 seconds and and we wouldn't go that much slower. But it was great. It was great training for me. And because we would probably average, I don't even remember now. But just even with the slow part, it wouldn't be that slow. It'd be probably 6:30 or something like that, or 6:20.
Well, it's interesting.
Had Leanne Warren already left? Had she already
No,
graduated?
she was there. Yeah, Leanne was still there, and she was. Yeah,
'cause wasn't she third or fourth at the Olympic trials in 80? And
she made the team in 80. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. In the 800.
Yeah, I was still in high school, and we duked it out in cross country, where we would exchange, but not in track in high school. She kicked everyone's pants off. She was amazing. I still remember her running the mile relay and getting the baton way behind everyone, and then she wound up winning for Crescent Valley, and she was playing basketball then. She played basketball and
I didn't realize that she's a basketball.
she played basketball. Yeah. So when I would do the Oregon had that big indoor meet, and I remember watching her, and she would come from basketball. She didn't have really that much track training. Leanne is a phenom. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say this I don't like to admit ever, probably everyone on this call is the same way. You don't like to admit that someone's better than you, right? Or more talented. It's really hard for me to say that. Even athletes today, I'll say, well, I overtrained, I did this, and blah, blah, blah. But it's rare for me to say that Leanne it's just too bad she had her injury problems and her stuff, because there's no way I should have a faster PR than her. No way. It's no way that, I mean, that I should have beaten her in my later years in college.
Was she knocked out of the sport permanently?
No, but she had some struggles with injury, and there was after she graduated from college, she had different coaches. Like she trained with 70 for a while, Bob 70, and
Yeah.
she did. So this is what Leanne did. She did indoors, outdoors, summer season in Europe, and then cross country. This was when I hadn't gone to Europe yet. And she did that for a couple years. And then she had some major surgeries. So Leanne, like, wicked fast. And then also I remember her coming down here and running like a what's that? Like an 8K or something. There was like some championships around here. And she like cleaned everyone's clock. So she 70 had her doing like 10 miles, like a lot of mileage. And I don't think that was probably the best for
You and
her.
I just had that conversation discussing the
did.
mileage. Bill, we talked, Claudette and I were talking earlier about athletes running high mileage in high school and then carrying it on to college, and the risk of obviously getting injured is increased greatly when you're overtrained. And in Leanne's case, that was probably more than what she needed to be doing. And especially she's an 800 runner. You're talking about 10-mile runs.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
but
much
then
more.
you find other people like Dick Berkeley would do a marathon every fall, but he was a miler and 5,000-meter runner.
Well,
He'd do like a 2:18 marathon as
Wow.
part of his training.
yeah, but there's
He's a pretty
exceptions
strict
to the
linear.
rule. But
Yeah, but
generally
then you
speaking,
go to
you
the
want to
other
be more
direction. You have Padilla, who probably never did much more than 40 miles a week.
40 miles a week. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
And
so.
Co never did more than when I was still in high school.
Well,
He
no,
came.
that's not really true. A lot of Coe's mileage was not considered running in his mind.
Oh,
What he reported was simply his speed work. Because Dave Martin, Dr. Dave Martin, actually did some collaboration with his dad, and he said he did a fair amount of base stuff. Just
okay.
he
So that's
didn't report it.
interesting to know. I remember like hearing him speak when I was in high school. He came to Eugene and gave a clinic, and I was thinking, wow, he only does, but that makes more sense.
I mean, he'd do a
Yeah.
warm up and not even record it.
Okay. I
Yes.
record all my.
But yeah, I mean, I'm these days if I walk, I count it.
Yeah. Uh,
So back to the question at Oregon, I had so many people to train with, Leanne Ranza Clark. She made the Olympic team for Canada, ran too flat. She and I and Leanne did a lot of track workouts together. There was just such a depth and breadth of good talent, of great talent, not good talent.
did you guys, gals, I mean, did you ever look at what the guys were doing? I mean, because the men's team was loaded. Bill and Benji, the men's team was loaded. They had Jim Hill, who was a sub 28 10K guy. They had Joaquin Cruz, who won the Olympic. Well, you guys know what he's done, but I mean, it was a very talented team. Did you guys ever look at what the guys were doing in workouts and
So
emulate do what they were doing, or did Tom have his totally separate
we were
approach to it?
kept really separate. So I would hear about their workouts and I would see them, and I know they did the Thursday morning like 7 a.m. and then they would come back. So I'd hear them what they were doing. But honestly, my freshman year, I was excited for our first cross country meet so I could see what the men's team looked like and who was on the team. I mean, I certainly got to know them later on, but I think Dellinger liked to keep it separate. And I think I remember even it's a little bit embarrassing, but like we took two buses to Washington for a dual meet, and me and I think Ranza, like we thought, oh, we'll go on the men's bus back, just just to mix things up. And Dellinger came on and kicked us off. He kept things pretty separate. There's nothing wrong with
Well,
that.
I never remember seeing the women's, you girls out there running when we were out there running. Never saw you guys.
We were probably on different days. I can't
We
remember
were
now.
Tuesday, Thursday.
And I think we were
Monday, Wednesday?
Monday, Wednesday, something like that.
Wow.
Sometimes we do an extra something on a Tuesday. So we rarely ran across you guys.
Claudette, were you involved in Athletes West and all that? Or was that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
were?
When I graduated college, I got that call to invite me to be Athletics West. And I have to say that was like to up to that point, that was like one of the most exciting moments because growing up in Salem,
It
seeing
was
all the
new. It was something new.
well, and I mean,
Professional.
AEW, like there would be, there was that Governor's Cup in Salem, and the first 10 places were AW, AW, AW. So that was like just drilled in my head. And I just looked at everyone with awe. And so when I was asked to be a part of it, I was thrilled. Like it
Did
was
you
like
ever, did you ever run with John Benoit or Patty Catalano Dillon?
no, because they were on the East Coast, but I trained with Mary Slaney for a while. When I graduated college, I trained with Luis de Oliveira, who Ron earlier mentioned, Joaquim Cruz, who won gold as a 21-year-old in the 800.
Yeah.
So I trained with the Brazilians, and I trained with Mary. But there were other AW athletes that lived in Eugene that I worked out with a little bit. Sue Addison and
Sue.
yeah, and Lee Arbogast. I think she might have done some workouts, but things were kind of separate. When you're in college, the AW athletes, it was all a little bit separate. And then when I graduated, I immediately started training with Luis, and he kept it all separate. He even had us come at half-hour intervals. He didn't want to have more than two athletes at a time because everything was very structured. Our time, our intervals, and then the timed rest. And so he would devote like his full attention. So if I would show up to the track at one, Joaquin might be leaving or just warming up, or vice versa. And then there was Barbosa and Gamares, and then Mary was there too. We were really the only women, and then Ranza Clark started training with us. So I didn't have a training partner typically, and he had Joaquin run separately because I think sometimes you get guys that want to like race each other. Not that Joaquin did, but you had Barbosa, and so he had everyone run their intervals separately. And I do understand that, but there's also, as everyone knows, there's really a benefit to having someone to do a workout together. Like Ranz and I did a lot of workouts. I think Luis let Ranz and I do some together. But at Oregon, having Leanne and having Ranz and having the other team, because there are days when you pull somebody else or somebody pulls you when you're not feeling quite right, but you're able to do, pull more out of yourself just because you have your one or two other training partners or a pack of people. It really helps. I find that it helps a lot.
Everyone's got their different strengths. Like, did you ever do stuff like hill repeats
Yeah.
as an 800-meter
Mm-hmm.
runner?
I
Yeah.
do, and I still do them. I was just telling Ron when we were talking. I did them yesterday. I do repeat 200s and hundreds. We did with Tom and Luis definitely had us. We would go into Hendricks Park and do sprints up the hills. I think hills are fantastic, especially as you get older for that strength. So I don't ever not want to do hills.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember trying to do hill repeats against, well, I shouldn't say against, but it felt a little, I was competitive with Greg Meyer when he moved to
Oh,
Boston to become a part of the Greater Boston Track Club and everything. But trying to do hill repeats with Greg Meyer or 400 meters, I don't have that fast twitch. But what I could do is try to hang on to him, be as close to him as I could be. So that's that part of training which you were talking about, Claudette, which is so powerful. Your
right.
teammates are absolute key. And I think that's what you're basically saying. We all benefit from our teammates, We all have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think Shalane Flanagan, I believe she's a coach at Oregon now.
She is. That's,
Is
yeah.
she, is she track and cross country?
She's both. That's correct. Yes.
I think that's really interesting, because I can't, I didn't have coaches like that though. I'd coach Billy Squires, who was a miler, But we knew he was very, very good. But to have someone like Shalane, who's one of the best on the planet, you know, it seems very intense. But a good thing because but I think the thing is, can a well-known runner, well, not, I couldn't be a good coach myself, I don't think. I could be in a low-key way, but you know what I'm saying.
I absolutely do know, because just being a great athlete doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. And I think there's examples of both. I think it can be helpful because you know the experience better than anyone else. And in terms of Shalane and her coaching, I don't know anything, about her program, but what I have noticed is that there are a lot of elite athletes during my era that are now coaching and have phenomenal success with their athletes, which is kind of exciting to see. But then on the flip side of it, when Alberto started coaching in the beginning, he went, like, he had a period where he trained people too hard because his name came up as a coach more in the last decade or so. With his more recent one, but he started, I think, in the 90s, right? And I mean, just
Mhm.
after he retired. And I think it took him a while to kind of figure out,
Adjust.
to adjust.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
yeah, because I think he was training people like he would train himself, and
Yeah.
he certainly put himself, like they administered last rites to him twice, I think, right? After found
Yes.
and
I
after one of his
know.
And also he did not do well at the games because he basically overtrained for them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I
And
think also now with kind of the struggle that happened with Alberto, and I think he was maybe a good coach for some athletes, the guys more so, as we now
Mhm.
know. And I think part of the problem in athletics was there weren't enough women coaches
Right.
in athletics. And I think I mean, do you see that changing now or
I
more?
do see that changing. And then, as you said that, I just realized, wait a minute, I've never had a female coach. And I think having a female coach, you add that extra element that a female potentially will understand, things a little bit better than a male coach. I'm not saying that a male coach can't, but it's certainly nice to have that as an option. And there weren't many female coaches at all. I mean, Rose Monday is a good friend of mine, and we competed at the same time, and she's very thoughtful with her training. She was the head Olympic coach in Tokyo, and it was at several other, coaches a lot of athletes, but um yeah, that back in my day. And I think also what's different today, there's a lot more research, because we're talking about overtraining. I definitely overtrained, and I didn't, I would kept going to my doctor and trying to get tests, and he's I'll never forget him saying, I went from being top one or top two in the country to in the 800, like running consistently 159s, to running 201s and being um maybe just top five and not making teams. And I knew something was wrong. And my weight had gone up, like, maybe 4 or 5 pounds. But in the scheme of things, when you look at it overall, there's nothing. I mean, like, I'm better than probably 95% of the country. And so he didn't take it very seriously, and he thought I was getting too old. And then he said something like, have you considered fluid replacement drinks, like drinking Gatorade? But I had a cortisol testosterone imbalance, and then I wound up, being hypothyroid that I didn't know. But like, I trained my ass off, and my the correlation between my training and my performances, inverted. And Ron and I were just talking about that. I wish that I had been able to back down, and leading that back to Rose, I know that there are a lot more testing that athletes are doing, and coaches are much more aware of things that we didn't know back then. And I just always thought, okay, let me just try harder. Like, I'm not trying hard enough, which was exactly the worst thing that I could have been doing, because
I mean,
as we're athletes, like, we're gonna push it to the metal, right?
Yeah, but you have to at some point say, okay, I need a break.
Right,
And
right.
that's a hard thing to do, but
A hard thing to
It's
do.
really hard. Yeah.
I mean, I think part of the reason I was as good as I was is I recognized when I needed a break.
Hmm.
And instead of saying, okay, I got to work harder, I said, okay, I'm getting flat. I need to back off. Because I had advisors and coaches over but most of the time I was self-directed. And I sometimes think I was a little lazy, and maybe that helped.
Do you think that the exercise physiology, the knowledge of training has skyrocketed? It is much more
Oh,
available. And
Amazing.
and we
It's
didn't
yeah.
have that really. We were winging it really to a
Yeah.
fair extent, don't you think?
we were absolutely winging it. I mean, I would regularly, because I tended to be anemic, and so I would get blood tests, and all they would do was CBC. They'd test my hemoglobin, my hematocrit, and my ferritin. And there was a period where it was high, and I remember opening the season. I remembered like running a 3:15, like in February, a 3:15 time trial in a 1200. So 65, 65, 65, which felt like nothing. And then coming back and running some 400s in like 58, 59. And this is February. And then I just progressively, and I didn't feel bad. That's the thing. I got the only thing that we were testing was iron, and I saw those levels
Iron.
decrease. But I wish that we had known to do, cortisol levels and DHEA and things like that, because later when I did the Baylor University, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name now. He was Joan Hans's coach.
Greg Lautenschlager.
No, Dr. Vaughn, I'm forget. I think he trained Lautenschlager, but he's older. Um, and he did a study on, they were doing a study on elite athletes and measuring their cortisol to testosterone ratio. And mine was like a tenth of normal.
Were you working with Luis then? Not, you weren't working with Tom at this time, were you?
I wasn't working with Tom. Like Tom did a really wonderful job of keeping it, at least, like we didn't overdo it. Like I worked hard. And Luis was a fabulous coach. And I like it. His workouts helped me, get to 158. But really, I should have, like, remember going into 87 thinking if I don't run at least 157, I'll be disappointed, because based on my workouts, I should have at least been running 156. But we just did more and more workouts. Before nationals in 87, I was on the track 5 times doing high intensity things, and I was exhausted. Um,
Five
so
times in 1 week.
one week, 5 times, yeah,
Oh,
5 times.
Huh?
It was
this
a
was
lot.
Luis. Was this
Right.
Luis?
It was Luis, and I just wish I could have done his workouts but cut it like by 10%, just a little bit, because then I was exhausted, and then I sort of spiraled down. So I don't feel like I ever reached anywhere near my potential. But I got far, but not where I think I could have been. And I think that with the testing that they're doing today with athletes, you'd be able to say, hey, these levels are off, as opposed to going to a doctor and not them knowing, and just saying, hey, drink Gatorade.
I don't remember ever being tested, ever, really.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm older, I
Well,
think.
so you're the true pioneer, and with all the mileage you did, too, that takes a beating on your.
I,
Yeah, but
I
also,
got tested when I was with AW like every 3 or 4 weeks, but I never got any feedback ever.
What?
Really?
No feedback. Well, yeah, I mean, Dick Brown told me to get it done, and nobody ever told me anything about it. I mean, but
It's
that was,
not.
and I don't know what I, I had probably my hematocrit was probably like 45, maybe 47, somewhere in there. I don't remember. Hemoglobin maybe was,
Low, isn't it? Isn't that low?
no, no,
That's actually
that,
pretty good. Yeah,
that's
mine would
Yeah.
fairly
be like
normal for
around
distance
30.
runners because for whatever reason, distance runners, normal distance runners
Uh,
tend to be lower than that. EPO distance runners tend to be higher than that. Um, but yeah, I think it was like a 14 maybe. And that's kind of where I am these days when I'm not taking performance degradation drugs, which actually I'm off of one of those right now, and I'm getting back up into those numbers. But you know, we just didn't do that. I mean, one, who paid for it?
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
so if you know, you'd end up paying for it yourself, and except that AW was paying for it that one year I ran for AW. But I was disappointed. Nobody ever said anything about it. Said, "Oh, your numbers are good," or "Your numbers are bad," or and I don't really know what all the tests were. I never saw the results. It just got shipped off
So
to
that's unfortunate. I mean, it would be interesting to see what they were. When I ran for AW, I mean, it's odd I mean, I heard that they would do testing, but they never tested me. I just independently did my own. And I was always like, my hemoglobin would be 11 to 12. So I was always on the low end. And
yeah,
my,
yeah, yeah. That's very low for
yeah, yeah.
for what you were doing. That 13 was probably as low as you should have been.
Right, right. I even would do, I did iron supplements, of course, and learned all the nuances of that. And when I was in Europe, I even did iron shots. Oh, I did iron shots here. But to your point, people weren't doing that. Who did pay for it? And also, if you're going to have tests like that, you need to have that, not just do them annually. Like if you go to the doctor once a year, it doesn't help you, because the year that I was sending my blood off to Baylor University, I FedEx it and they paid for it all. It was and which was really lovely. But I remember every 6 weeks my ferritin what kept going down by a lot. And then by the time I went to nationals, I didn't even want to look at it, because I didn't want to go into nationals thinking, oh, my levels are. I didn't want it to affect my head. It is what it is. But every 6 weeks it went down like 20 points, and then it was really pretty low.
I mean, today you think of your regular doctor, your internal medicine doctor. I never knew a doctor. I never said anything to them about my ferritin levels. I didn't know anything about it. The only athlete I knew in the 80s doing something like that was John Tracy. And he worked with a cardiologist. And he would test John's blood after he ran a marathon to make sure he was recovering. So that's the first time I ever heard of something like that. But I think maybe because, road racing, marathoning was kind of like a stepchild of the track world,
Well, I mean, LaCory talked about being track was Carnegie Hall and road racing was rock and roll.
And it's exactly true.
Yeah, to a degree, I mean, because we were undisciplined, and I mean, we sure trained hard, but we didn't do things in a it's sometimes formalized, but for the most part, it was a little bit seat of the pants.
I
I
would
think
think it would be more important probably for you guys getting the testing, because you're doing so many more miles, and that's where you can run into
But
problems
but, but
with
we didn't know.
right.
As
No,
well
yeah,
as I mean, Dr. Dave probably would have been, if I'd asked him, he'd have done stuff,
Dave
and he
Martin,
probably would
yeah,
have known what
yeah,
to look for. But
he
in
was
general, who do you ask? I mean, I,
yeah.
right.
I remember talking to some doctors at a convention. They asked me to come in and talk to them, and I said, basically, you're talking to a different kind of person than you are a normal person. Um, and you need to learn about what distance runners and you know athletes in general are, and what drives us, and operate under those principles, because a lot of them would say, well, your running's not that healthy for you. You should just quit doing that. And that right there turns us off, and so we don't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Like when I went he was the head of sports medicine at UCLA, and I had this big book, 10 years worth of blood tests. Granted, there was just my CBC, which had my ferritin and hermatitis. It didn't have any testosterone or cortisol or DHEA, because I didn't know to have that tested. Um, and he didn't even want to look at it. He didn't even like look at it. And I had a whole history of it. And then I remember Ellen Van Langen, she won gold in the 800 in 96. And she was training in Santa Monica for a little bit. And I was friends with her. And I remember I remember her back in the day when faxing was new, you send a fax, no one uses anymore. She faxed me a listing of the routine blood tests that she got. And I remember being flabbergasted, because we had this conversation and she said, oh, yeah, because to your point, I think, Benji, you were saying like after work, oh no, maybe about John Tracy getting tested
That was
to see
Bill.
how he depleted, they
European
would
guy,
do, yeah,
John
yeah,
Casey.
yeah. And she was showing me all the tests that she routinely got throughout the season. And I think that's where at the time the US was behind a lot of the European countries of the people that I know of, because they were on it. They were on it. And even when you look at the Eastern Bloc that were doing things that I would have never considered doing with, drug use and things like that, they would test the lactate levels, we would read, after a workout, and they would determine when an athlete was done and they should stop. At least that's what I heard. And I thought that's a lot more scientific way of training, instead of just saying, okay, the whole group is going to do 12 times 400s with 30 seconds rest or whatever. And maybe Bill, you should do 16, and Ron, maybe you should do 8 or something like that. It's like not a one size fits all. And it really makes me happy to see the coaches today are paying more attention,
Yes.
and athletes are getting tests, and that there are coaches like you, Ron, who don't overload your athletes, but you build them up, and then you see these great results. And so that's gratifying to me to see that.